All right, it looks like we are live.
Alrighty then.
For anyone who's actually watching us live, thank you very much for watching us. Wasn't really originally intended for public audience, but if you're watching, thank you. And if you have any questions, go ahead and use the Q&A app to send them to us, and maybe we'll get around to answering some of them. But first off, Misha, I'd like to. This is going to be kind of about your personal experiences with game products, the game community at large, and any kind of public game spaces you've been in. So, when was the last time you were at a convention or publicly organized playing event?
I was at a house con in September, but the last public con would have been April, so around Easter. It was the Maelstrom.
Okay.
Up in New Jersey.
So
actually, I take that back. I was at Camp Nerdly after that, so Camp Nerdly is more recent than that, it was in May. So.
Okay. So can you describe the demographics at each of those three events, the HouseCon, Nerdly, and Maelstrom, sort of as you observed them or as you experienced them?
Sure. So the HouseCon, the organizers were really making an effort for diversity. So it was pretty much I'd say about 50-50 women, men. Quite a few more people of color than I would see normally at a convention, just by percentages. The Camp Nerdly is more family friendly. So there were adults, kids, a little broader of diversity too. It's a lot of families and some adults is what it's gearing towards. Or at least the parts of it that I see a lot, because I have two small people. So I end up with a lot of kid track stuff. And I was running the kid track this year, so that probably had a bit to do with it. And then Maelstrom, mostly adult, probably higher diversity than your average con. Exposure ones. Yeah, so.
Okay. So when did you first get into kind of tabletop gaming, and what got you into it?
So I was hanging out at a mall, waiting to see a movie with a friend of mine, and there's some guys sitting at a table, and they had just bought Earth Dawn, and were planning a campaign with porting their Shadowrun characters into it. And so me and my buddy are standing there looking at it and going, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, we're going to play this game. You want to play too? And so we all went to the same school. I went to Georgia Tech down in Atlanta. So we arranged to meet up with them the next day, and that was when I started. That was 20 years ago or so.
Okay. I know the gaming community at large, and even the tabletop community, doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to being welcoming to women and people of color. So have you had experiences at cons or in public places or with other members of the community where it hasn't been that inviting?
So my first D&D game was a con game at Dragon Con probably 15 years ago. I hadn't played D&D, and I'd seen the cartoon. That was about my exposure to D&D. So I'm like flipping through the book. I saw a picture. The woman kind of looked like Storm. I'm like, oh, that looks like a cool concept. So I make up what I find out later is a drow. Didn't know this at the time. I was like, oh, it's an elf. She's got dark skin and dark hair. Okay, cool. That sounds like good. I walk in. I describe my character walking into the tavern where the rest of the characters are sitting, and one of the characters slits my throat, and the GM lets him. So I kind of left the table and did not come back to D&D for a long while. But yeah, so it's not always been perfect. I didn't go to cons for a long while because Dragon Con was a little. There were guys who were a little grabby, and I was not appreciative of that. So I didn't go to cons for a while. After that, the first con I went back to was a friend of mine managed to drag me to Nerdly probably 4 years ago. And then I went to Dreamation the following year. So it was a while before there was a good 10, 15-year gap where I did not go to cons. So.
Okay. You mentioned the artwork in D&D for the Drow. Especially in older editions, there wasn't much representation for people who weren't white men or the trophies of white men for certain definition there.
Yeah.
So, have you had trouble kind of finding yourself in gaming material across games?
It's getting easier. More recently, I am seeing a push for more people who look like me, people who look like my daughter, people who look like my son. My husband, he can find anybody. He's a white guy. It was a lot harder before, which is one of the reasons that I gravitated towards that drow. Was she was the closest thing I saw that looked like me in that book. I tended to play elves. I tended to play outsider characters because I wasn't finding myself in books. So, but I have noticed a push in the opposite direction. I am noticing there are more people of color in books. There are more women of color in books. If we could work on the bikini male, I'd be happy. But I am seeing more reasonable armor in books, though. So I will say that. So yeah, it's getting better.
Okay. So what sort of things have you seen that are making it better, other than just having an easier time finding art that looks like you and your family?
I'm seeing people make an effort towards making sure they're being inclusive. I'm seeing people looking for models saying, hey, I'm looking for, an African-American male or an African-American woman who's willing to do some modeling so that I can base. I'm seeing in writing when I'm seeing calls for authors that are, hey, we're looking for, who are from marginalized communities, who are POC, who are lesbian, who are queer, to do some writing and work with us. I'm seeing, calls for, hey, I'm working on this topic. It might be kind of sensitive. If there's anybody out there who'd be willing to consult for me, of course, I'd pay you. Or if you just want to hop on a chat with me, that'd be great. I'm seeing the effort. Not all the efforts are as good as others. Some of them are a step, but some of them aren't quite there yet. But it is being efforts. I am seeing efforts being made.
Okay. What kind of efforts at cons or at well, let's start with cons. What kind of efforts at cons have you seen that you think are successful or that would help you feel safe or represented or like a part of the community?
One of the biggest ones I've seen is I know the double exposure ones. They're doing a really big crackdown on the blackface drow, which are one of those things that kind of drive me a little nuts. They're really, really responsive to, hey, there's a guy and going up and actually, hey, this is not cool. You can't do this here, and actually walking the walk. The gender neutral bathrooms that they do there at the double exposure cons. We kind of do the same thing at Nerdly sometimes too. It's like, look, people have to pee. I'm not going to look at you peeing. Just let me pee. So there's a push for that. Also, there's never enough women's rooms. It's just not fair. And So those are the two main things. I don't go to a lot of the bigger cons just because I have small kids, and I don't like people groups just because people in crowds are not my thing. So I like the size of the ones I go to. They're a little on the smaller side, so it's easier to get that personal attention when, hey, I'm noticing something's wrong. Can you do something about it? And they've been pretty responsive about it.
Okay. Some of those are proactive solutions, like having gender-neutral labeled bathrooms. Some of them are reactive solutions, like responding to a complaint or question or issue. How can a con or community or even a game store make it clear to you that they will respond to an issue that you have?
Having a harassment policy up front, at least show me that you're thinking about the issues. Is always a good first step. Cosplay is not consent. These are the minimum levels of behavior we expect from people who are coming. Is really useful, and having something that is thought out and written up ahead of time so that it shows that, hey, these are the things that we allow and don't allow. These are the actions that we're going to take if you violate those rules somehow. And this is what we're aiming for. So having that up front makes it a little more welcoming to begin with. When you walk into a con floor, not having is always a good step for me. I don't really go for that. I mean, I like when women are cool. I like boobs as much as the next person probably, but I don't need to see it 24/7. And so if that's the first thing I see when I walk onto the floor, I'm probably going to turn around and go back out. That pretty much tells me, this space is not meant for me. Same with, not of cultures as weird, the strange Asian fetish things going on. I've seen some kind of interesting depictions of African people in artwork. So if those are the things that you're putting up front and front and center, that kind of tells people that okay, we're not really interested in seeing you here. Not saying that there isn't a place for it, just maybe not at the front of the store.
Okay. So now that we've had a chance to talk a little bit about cons and public places, what things have you seen when it comes to products that have made them feel more welcoming to you?
So there's a few Kickstarters going on now. SIG, the splash artwork is this gorgeous panoply of characters. I mean, you've got all skin tones, you've got all kinds of hair textures, you've got all kinds of beautiful, diverse color going on, and so something like that grabs your eye and pulls me in. It's like, all right, that's an instant, yes, definitely, please. If I'm flipping through a book, I'm kind of glancing, are all the pictures I'm seeing of white guys, are all the pictures, are all the fully clothed and all the women half clothed, that kind of, definitely when I'm thinking about buying something, that's something I'm have an eye towards. And then as far as language goes, as I'm reading it, are all the pronouns he? Is it assumed that the protagonist is always male? Is it assumed that the player is always male? These kind of things, I know at least as many women. These things make a difference.
Okay. You mentioned that you took a long break between cons. So you had, as you said, 10 or 15 years from your last Dragon Con to your most before you started going back to cons again. You said someone kind of dragged you to a con again, and that got you started going back? What made you willing to go along with that?
It was I moved from Atlanta to Baltimore, and so for a while I had lost. I wasn't gaming at all because I didn't want to be the creepy old person who hung out at the college to look for game. Because I had been around those creepy people, and I didn't want to be that creepy person. So my friend, he actually lives down the street. His name's Daniel. His daughter and my daughter went to the same preschool, and one day I noticing him reading a gaming book, and so I started chatting with him. And we ended up playing a game, playing some hangout games. And he's like, "Oh, you should come to this cool con," And so it was no, really, I swear nobody's gonna grab your ass here. Nobody's gonna be a pain in the ass here. That made it so that I was willing to try it again. The fact that it was a family-friendly place was also a plus. It's like, you can bring the kids, they'll hang out, they'll have fun. You're not going to be ditching your family for a weekend, which was at the time was a concern because my kids were really little then. Now I'm a little more likely to.
Okay, well, that's actually another issue that the game community doesn't have a great reputation, in spite of, well, different games have a different sort of reputation for their level of family friendliness and appropriateness, and people assume that the people playing those games may or may not have that same level as the game itself. So can you address how people in a public place might either make you less comfortable with their behavior while playing a certain game or more comfortable with their behavior?
There are certain games I don't play with strangers. Period. The end. And I also have a personal rule of I have to know at least one other person at the table when I'm sitting down at a strange table. Just it's a safety thing for me. It's I want somebody there who I know will back me up when I'm sitting down. But there's I'm trying to think. Dream Askew, while a beautiful game and a game that I love playing with my home groups, is not a game that I will play with strange people in public. There's too much potential for it to go really weird with people you don't know. And so there are some things that I do for my own comfort and my own safety that, it's just, there are things I do and don't do at cons. Monster Hearts is borderline whether I'll play it in public or not. If I know enough of the people there, yeah, sure, no problem. If I don't know anybody there are some themes that can have a tendency to go a little weird. And so it's not something that I would do. So as far as, it's not that it's an adult theme, I don't mind playing with adult themes. I do mind playing with adult themes with people I don't know. And that's more of a safety thing. Yeah, don't play at those tables. We tend to keep them on.
You were cutting out a little bit. Can you repeat?
So yeah, they got some time.
Can you repeat?
Yeah, I was saying, like Camp Nerdly has a kids track, and we try to keep the games themed towards the under 10 age range. So you'll have Mermaid Adventures, and you'll have Superhero Bakery, and you'll have some mini LARPs that are geared towards kids that are definitely family friendly and that don't contain those adult themes. The riskiest thing we did, we played a pillion with the kids last year, and I'm still upset that my kid got to play a pillion before I did. So yeah. Okay,
so you mentioned a lot of good experiences and a couple of kind of negative experiences. Do you have any other experiences that you'd like to talk about as relates to diversity, whether that's of age appropriateness, race, gender, anything?
So one of the things I've done recently, I did answer a call for writers. It was specifically geared towards looking for people of color to come onto the team, and I'm kind of excited about it. My job actually is to make book. So that's one of the things I'm making sure I'm doing. You know, I don't have a single white guy in my print, which it's kind of, well, that's not entirely true. I have one white person who is a gender. So I've been trying to play with, you know, making sure that there's diversity across continents, diversity across gender spectrum, diversity across sexuality spectrum, just to make sure that I decided I wanted to do. And so yeah, and I've been trying to put my money where my mouth is, and actually looking at when I'm buying stuff, looking at what's being presented and what's being represented there. So.
Okay, so speaking of representation, not necessarily just in the fiction and in the writing, but also as part of the creative team, what have you noticed anything in particular about the demographics of the people who get their name on the front cover of books?
I'm seeing more women. I'm seeing. I don't always know who's going with the name, so from some of that, you can kind of tell. Okay, an Anna is probably a woman, whereas a Josh is probably a man. A Laura is probably a woman. But as far as unless there's like an author pick or something, it's kind of harder to tell ethnicity or racial background. I am seeing on like when I am looking at Kickstarter pages and stuff like that. If not, I am seeing more, at least in the stretch goals authors that they're bringing in. I am seeing more diversity in them. So it might not be the name on the front of the book, but it's the name in the book. A name in the book. Although I am seeing some. I haven't seen them all published yet. So I've played some games that have been written by some great people, but they haven't been published yet. So we're getting there.
Okay. So do you think there's a benefit to having the game designer, the person actually creating the mechanics for the game, be someone from a traditional background? By not traditional, I mean not your sort of middle class white guy, which is where most of the historical tabletop game designers have come from over the last, I want to say 30 odd years, 40, 50 years maybe.
Yeah. Mechanically, I'm not sure, just because I'm crap at mechanics personally. But having somebody there when you're doing the story, definitely. And when you're building the world around the mechanics. For example, one of my favorite games is Monster Hearts, and I like Apocalypse World, but post-apocalyptic isn't my jam. It's nice every now and again, but it's not my thing. Whereas Monster Hearts, it really gets to the heart of the matter, and I don't know how much of that is because Avery is non-traditional and poured herself into that game versus how much the engine would have been, how much the engine drove that. Like, the Powered by the Apocalypse engine is great and it's diverse, and I've seen a lot of wonderful games coming out of it, and I don't know if anybody else had created that engine, would it be different than the way Vincent created that engine. So I'm kind of punting because I don't know. Mechanically, I don't know how much the mechanics would make a difference. But yeah, definitely in the conception of the world and things around it, I'm seeing it does make a difference.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to ask again if any people in the audience have any particular questions they'd like to ask, and if so, go ahead and use the Q&A app. But other than that, I'm sort of running out of questions, and we're running it a half an hour now. So
right.
I think I've gotten enough for what I need.
Cool. Alrighty.
Give people in the audience a few seconds to see if they have any questions.
Can you tell if people are actually watching? That's always weird.
Yeah,
I'm always weirded out when people actually watch. it's like I do Chain World with Indie Plus every other week, and so every now and again I get like somebody will ping me. It's like, hey, I saw it. I'm like, who are you? And why are you talking to me? What do you mean you watched what I did? That's just weird. That still weirds me out.
All right. Well, looks like we're not getting any questions, so thank you very much for joining me. And,
all right.
I will hopefully see you around.
All right. Talk to you later.